Hi, my name's Haley. I'm 31 years old. I was born in New Hampshire, but spent most of my life in Wakefield, Mass. So I kind of consider that to be where I am from. Um, Currently, I don't work anywhere consistently. I do a lot of gig work. So, like pet sitting, random pop up stores, like temporarily for like retail, dog walking, basically anything. Um, I started feeling anxiety severely, very, very young. And it definitely has done a huge effect on my life. I remember being very young and just not wanting to be around a lot of people and just always having like this intense feeling in my body and feeling like an elephant was sitting on my chest. And nobody really could tell me why. I thought I was sick. So all the time I would tell my parents I was sick and they just thought I was faking it. Um, it wasn't for a couple of years after some kind of chaotic life things started happening with my mom and her husband that it became more obvious that it was something more than just me thinking I was sick or saying I was sick. We ended up moving to Wakefield when I was 12 to live with my grandfather. And that's when it became a lot more apparent that it was that specifically. I would not want to go to school, not because I just didn't want to go. Just being around people constantly gave me such bad anxiety that like it was torture going. Um, I actually missed 90 days of school my 7th grade year because of it. And I was lucky that I got to not stay back because they were aware of a lot of stuff going on in my life and my grades were really good. So they let me continue. Um, I remember waking up every day, like when I was younger, feeling like an elephant was sitting on my chest for hours every morning. I would dread waking up, and there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. It didn't have to be anything specific. It was like it was just always there. I went to about 11 different schools by the time I stopped going to school in the 10th grade. So that played a role, I think, in just making my social anxiety worse. I hated being around groups of people, especially if I didn't know them or have somebody close with me, to the point where I wouldn't do it. Like I would do anything in my power not to do something. Um, and that was hard. It made it not easy to function. It made relationships tough because people want to go out and do things, and it just made me seem strange. And feeling strange as a teenager is already a factor, so adding more to it just made things even worse. By the time I was 17, I had been hospitalized twice for different suicide like ideations, not because of depression though, because of just being so overwhelmed that I didn't want to be alive anymore. It wasn't like necessarily that I wanted to die. I just couldn't handle constantly feeling overwhelmed with everything. Like even the simplest tasks just seemed so hard. Um, I would try to plan everything out and write it step by step, you know, make different plans to get things complete. And it just never happened because I couldn't get myself to do things. I remember feeling like every little thing, even just getting up to shower, was too much, couldn't handle it. And it was tough. It it made me and my family fight. It caused a bunch of problems, and I just wanted to feel like I was understood. So I ended up kind of getting into the wrong crowd because I felt understood by some of these people and didn't feel judged by them and felt like I could be myself and that they wouldn't put me in situations that were hard, which my family wasn't putting me in situations that were hard to be mean. They were doing it because you have to do certain things in life. So by the time, so I ended up leaving home and moving in with a significantly older boyfriend. And that lasted a few months before I moved back in with my grandfather, and my boyfriend came with me. About 6 months later, that ended. But during those 6 months, I could not do anything without him. Like, it wasn't so much that like I wanted to be around him, but I was just so emotionally crippled and just couldn't handle anything on my own, or felt like I needed some kind of support with me to do anything. Um, and I was never really taught how to be an adult. Like, I had a really rough upbringing. My family was very unstable. There was, not a lot of consistency. A lot of the things that, I was taught are not things a normal kid was taught. You know, I never got like lessons on how to survive in life or how to, be a normal, stable, productive adult. So that added a lot onto it too. Um, by the time I was 18, I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know what to do because I had not a clue what steps to take. And of course, every step seemed astronomically hard. I was just trying to survive. So even though I felt anxious a lot, it was a different kind of anxiety because I was constantly just trying to do the simplest things to survive. It was almost like I was able to put my anxiety that I'd suffered with my whole life kind of on a back burner because I didn't have time to be anxious for all that stuff. Like, yes, I had a ton of anxiety and stress, and it wasn't easy, but it was just a whole different type. Like, I would be so focused on just making certain things happen that it was almost better for a little bit because I started being able to do a couple of things that I'd never been able to do. But at the same time, I wasn't making any major progress with, getting a job and a house and all that thing because I was just trying to survive. I got in trouble when I was 19 and ended up having to serve some time for it. And that gave me a lot of time to think. That really changed my grandiose behavior, I guess. Like, I was kind of this all or nothing, like, either everything needs to happen now or it's never going to happen, or just, I can't do this, the world's over type of thing. So I had to sit and think with a lot of things I had done and just the ways I felt. And there was no escaping any of it. There was no, getting away from that feeling because there was nothing but time to think about it. But it also took away a lot of those stresses I was talking about. So I got to work on my mental health a little bit. There were some DBT classes there. There was groups you could attend for mental health. So those helped a decent amount. I mean, I ended up doing therapy later on in life, and that definitely made more of an impact, but that was a good start. It gave me kind of a understanding of those types of things. So part of that is when you're about to get out, you go to a halfway house, and the halfway house was a huge challenge for me. At 22, 23 years old, I had very minimal jobs, like probably 6 months or less out of my whole life that I worked. I had a room at a rooming house for a couple of months, and that was it for my entire having an apartment or something that was mine. So when you go there, you are required to get a job in the real world and work so many hours a week to earn like outings and stuff like that, and to just be able to stay there. So going to a job 32 hours a week, such as, you know, food service and stuff, that's a job where you're around a lot of people, was terrifying. And I honestly don't think I could have done it if it wasn't for the fact that the alternative was just so much worse. I ended up getting a job at Dunkin' Donuts, and every single night I would have nightmares about going to work. I would wake up every hour and look at the clock counting down until I had to go back. And when I was there, it wasn't as bad. For some reason, it was just the thought of dealing with it was way worse than the actual action. Not that it wasn't hard, because it was quite stressful, but it wasn't as bad as my head played it out to be. And I would, it'd affect my sleep, it would affect my eating. It made me super emotional and all over the place. It was tough, and I barely skated through with it. Did that for about 4 months before I was out, and I had never worked that much in my life. Like, I was working 40 hours a week, sometimes like up to 60, and I had never done anything close to that. So it was definitely like, I was proud of it, but at the same time, like, I still to this day remember like having terrible nightmares and like crying sometimes because I was so upset that I had to go to work the next morning. And I just couldn't tell you why. Like, I know I have a hard time being around a lot of people, but once I knew what I was doing and had a routine, it wasn't as bad there. For some reason, just the thought of it overwhelmed my body so intensely, like, it felt horrible. Once I got out, I was in a relationship and things were going good. He was super supportive. It was actually somebody that I dated when I was younger, the gentleman who was significantly older, and he was super supportive and was just trying to help me get on my feet and kind of figure myself out. And that was okay, but I just didn't have a connection with him like enough to be romantically in a relationship. He was kind of more my best friend, and I wanted it to be more because he was so supportive and just great to be around. But after several months, it was just clear it wasn't, and it was pretty hard. It didn't end very well. It was upsetting, and it kind of caused everything to crash and burn. So during that time, I ended up trying to get another job, and that was a disaster because I had always worked with that pressure of, having a severe consequence of not having that, even though, not having money and being back on the streets and being homeless as a consequence wasn't the same in my head. It didn't compute through the same way. So I was still going through, the same things as before, crying, or going to work, being super upset, hating being there. And this place was a lot more stressful. Like, the people that worked there weren't as nice, and they didn't work as well together as the job I had before. So it definitely made it a lot harder. I ended up walking out in the middle of the shift because I just couldn't handle the anxiety anymore, like the feeling like I couldn't breathe. There was a bubble in my chest, and because of that, I ended up losing the apartment I had and was back to being homeless. And over the next couple of years, I spent a lot of time in and out of psych hospitals, working with therapists, just trying to figure out why I had such this all or nothing thinking, or just couldn't stand working around or being around large groups of people constantly, or even doing simple things like making phone calls. If I had to make an appointment and stuff, sometimes I'd be fine. Other times I would let things go for months. And it's been such a struggle. Like, I never in my life could think, like, when I was younger, that anxiety could do so much to impede on your life, just cause so many problems and get in the way of so many things. And it really can. It's just, it affects you in so many ways, like not sleeping, not eating healthy so you don't feel well. It affects your relationships because, nobody wants to be around somebody who's constantly miserable or upset or just, you know, feeling like they can't handle anything. I definitely think as I've gotten older, it's gotten slightly better. I mean, I go through periods where, I'm doing a little bit okay and can do like some normal things. Like I can, you know, function day to day without feeling like the world's going to explode. But I still have trouble, with the social things or even just making appointments, taking care of anything outside my home. I had a therapist for many years up until a couple years ago, and that definitely made a huge difference. I was also on a lot of medication for a while, and that helped so much, but unfortunately, it just wasn't something I could continue to take forever. And so I've been kind of having to relearn how to live without that, which has definitely been hard because once you've like lived like this for so long and then finally gotten to feel that peace, it makes it very difficult to go backwards. I was in a relationship a few years ago that was really good at first, and I thought, this was the love of my life, and he understood me and he motivated me to do things, and he sat with me and made those phone calls and encouraged me to do little things and showed me how to, live life like a responsible adult. And unfortunately, after a couple of years, that relationship took a turn and became abusive and took away all those things from me. I ended up becoming super dependent on him because he made it that way and just went very much backwards. I had new fears that I had never had before and new anxieties. I was timid. I didn't want to even leave my bed because I felt like I was, in danger or just not going to be okay. And that was tough. I ended up, there was an incident and he was arrested because of it. And that incident definitely changed a huge part of me mentally. I wasn't as anxious about a lot of things that I had been. I was just kind of almost numb to everything. But because of that, I was just allowing all sorts of craziness to happen and not making responsible decisions and getting myself in situations that were absolutely out of control. And after a while of that, I finally started to feel more present and life was just a total mess. And trying to cope with that and figure out how to even just put little things back together was extremely overwhelming. I couldn't just getting like simple things like clothes or to a shelter or anything like that. It wasn't easy for me. Like I had so many things that needed to be done. I didn't know where to begin. And there's only so much that people can do to help you with that kind of stuff. I finally started, being able to get things done with the help of one of my caseworkers, just small tasks and, kind of broke things down, and she'd make calls with me and help me get things set up and just encouraged me like to continue to go to therapy and take medication and participate in groups and just, you know, help try to overcome whatever caused these initial anxieties in the first place. Like, till this day, I could never tell you why or what started my anxiousness in the first place. I just remember being so young and worrying about everything. Not, I don't even know if you call it anxiety then when you're 7 or 8 years old, but like every little thing I would just obsessively worry about or ask a lot of questions, and even things that weren't like directly pertaining to me. I was just always so worried about what was going on and, you know, why certain things happened and things like that. And as so many life events happened, it made it so much worse. Like, I remember going to the hospital probably 13 times in like an 8-month period when I was about 11 years old, because I would get that such intense chest pain that my mom thought something was wrong, and so did I. I'd feel like I was dying, and they could never tell me what was wrong. And like, even once they said it was anxiety, there was never like an answer how to make it stop. Like, waking up every morning and know you're going to feel the worst you could possibly feel, and there's just kind of nothing you can do about it except to try to ignore it or try to, distract yourself, is such a terrible way to live. And just always feeling like an outcast and like you don't fit in, like socially, you go places, and even if you're invited and you're at a party with your friends, you feel like you can't really conversate with anybody, or if you do, that you're saying the wrong things, or you just spend the whole time sitting in the corner and then leaving because you feel weird and you don't want your friends to look at you like you're weird, because it's already a hard enough time getting to functions like that. You don't want to not be invited anymore at all, and just things like that. I've had very few friends growing up. I have a couple that are very close, and I'm lucky for that, but it it's a horrible feeling to grow up and, spend most of your life without people around that you consider to be close to. I have, a couple of family members who I love very much and I'm close to, but other than that, there's not a whole lot of people, and it's hard. It is a lonely life, and it makes time go by slow. It makes you think way more than you should, which also adds to the anxiety, because then you're over analyzing things and things like that. Like, still to even today, like to this date, like I have such a hard time sometimes even calling and making appointments. I let my 2 front teeth rot out because I was too anxious to call the dentist for so many months. And I don't know why. Like, I can't figure it out. My anxiety nowadays isn't as bad as it was, but it's different. It's like almost like it's a different kind. Like, it's hard to explain because it's still just a general anxiety, but it feels different than it used to. It doesn't feel like that's all or nothing anymore. Like that grandiose, like, oh my God, everything's too much, I just can't do it feeling is gone. But I'm still overwhelmed by everything. So, I mean, I will say it's nice to not feel like I want the world to end, because so much is going on and I can't handle it. And I am grateful every day for that. But I'm just trying to slowly work towards getting in a good habit and pushing myself to complete things that do make me anxious, because they're not that hard. And once I do them, I realize that they're a lot easier. And that's like the best thing you can do, is just kind of keep pushing yourself little by little and breaking things down into smaller steps and just trying to figure out how you can make yourself more comfortable doing it. I recently got a new doctor because mine retired, and that's been tough because I worked with somebody for a while who I really liked, and people's opinions are different and their views, and it can be really hard. But I'm trying to not let that affect me too much so I don't go backwards to things that were pretty bad. I mean, I'm in a place now where I have my own home. Um, I have a boyfriend I love. I, you know, do little jobs here and there that I can handle instead of having a consistent job with a place and end up leaving because working long periods at a very busy or someplace that has a lot of contact with people is just too much. So I figured things out that make things easier for me. And that just takes time. Unfortunately, it's tough, but it's all you can do.